Tonight, we're hitting the dark, lonely highways of Texas, roads where shadows move on their own. Radios whisper things you don't want to hear, and what's real feels unreal. I'm sharing the most disturbing, true trucker horror stories, encounters that real drivers lived through, and some of them didn't walk away unscathed. If you love horror, hit subscribe now, turn on the bell, and don't forget to like this video. Drop a comment below telling us where and at what time you're watching. I want to know who's brave enough to follow these stories. So buckle up, and remember, out here the highways have secrets, and sometimes the shadows follow you farther than you think. My name's Ray Holloway, and I've been driving long haul for 26 years. You name a highway between San Antonio and Wichita Falls, I've seen it at least twice. But there's one stretch I'll never drive again. Route 281 southbound, somewhere between Blanco and Johnson City. I used to think the worst thing that could happen on the road was fatigue, or some fool in a sedan cutting across your blind spot. Turns out there are things worse than sleep deprivation. Things that watch from the dark shoulder of the road. Things that follow. That night started ordinary enough. I was hauling 30 tons of dry freight and insulation panels, headed to San Antonio. Left Fort Worth around 10, figured I'd make it by sunrise if I kept steady. The sky had that copper haze you get after a hot day, even though the air had cooled a bit. My Kenworth T680 hummed along smooth, and the CB crackled with a few voices before dying off around midnight. Route 281's a strange one. Long, flat, empty. Once you hit Blanco County, it feels like the world just stops. No cars, no billboards, not even gas stations open past 10. Just fences, mesquite trees, and the sound of your own engine. I'd turned off the radio. Didn't want noise, just wanted to focus. But as the clock on my dash ticked past 12:47 a.m., I started feeling that crawling unease, the kind you can't quite name. The air conditioning blew steady, but my arms prickled like I was standing in a cold draft. The temperature gauge read fine, yet my breath fogged the glass. Then I saw it. About a mile ahead, right past a faded mile marker, stood a figure on the shoulder. Could have been a hitchhiker, maybe broken down, but the way it stood, I knew something was off. Too still, not shifting weight, not signaling, not even turning toward the light. I eased off the gas, dropped to 50. Headlights washed over the figure. Tall, thin, no reflectors, no detail, just blackness. Not shadow, not absence of light. This thing drank the light. As soon as the beams hit it, it vanished. I figured it must have been heat shimmer, maybe exhaustion. But my rearview mirror told me otherwise, because there it was again, in my mirrors, walking along the shoulder behind me. Step for step, always just far enough to keep in view. I shook it off, told myself I was overtired. Been on the road 10 hours, maybe more. I rolled down the window for some air, but the night was dead quiet. Not even crickets. Just wind sliding over the cab and that deep hum of rubber on asphalt. 20 minutes later, the shadow showed again. This time closer, maybe 50 feet behind, moving steady. I radioed out of instinct. Breaker 19, any ears on 281 near Blanco? Got a pedestrian on the shoulder, no lights, might be in danger. Nothing but static. I tried again. This time I caught something, a faint garbled. A man's voice, low, distant. Couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like, "Don't stop," then silence. By 1:30 a.m., I realized I hadn't passed another vehicle for over 2 hours. No taillights ahead, no headlights behind. Just me, the hum of the engine, and the white line stretching into eternity. GPS still showed I was on Route 281, though the screen flickered every few minutes, signal dropping in and out. That's when I noticed something else. The mile markers were repeating. Same dented post, same patch of gravel, same broken reflector. I'd driven past the same mile 178 sign 3 times. At first I thought I was looping mentally, zoning out. But the odometer didn't lie. The miles kept climbing. And yet somehow I was still seeing mile 178. When I checked the side mirror again, the figure was gone. Relief washed over me until I glanced into the passenger side convex mirror. It was there, leaning against my trailer. It moved wrong, not fast, not slow, just unnatural. Every step it took seemed to glide, like the road itself bent to carry it along. The CB crackled again. A voice, faint, dry, like air rushing through wires. "Keep driving, Ray." That froze me. No one knew I was out here. No dispatcher, No nearby truckers, nobody on this frequency. The voice came again, softer now. Don't look back. I don't know why, but I listened. Hands white on the wheel, eyes locked on the center line. I pushed the accelerator just enough to feel the gears shift. The cab shuddered, a low vibration under my seat, like hitting rumble strips that weren't there. Then, something hit the side of my trailer. Hard, once, twice, like fists slamming metal. I caught the reflection in the rear view for half a second, the shadow crawling up the side, limbs stretching too long, too thin, gripping the steel, and then it was gone. By 2:11 a.m. I was nearly panicking. My hands were numb. The air smelled like ozone and burnt rubber, even though the truck was running fine. When I finally saw lights ahead with a gas station sign flickering open 24 hours, I nearly cried, pulled in fast, too fast maybe. The place was deserted, but the lights were on, neon buzzing. I killed the engine, climbed out, and stood there in the silence. The air was heavy, metallic. That's when I noticed the mud on my tires, except it wasn't mud. It was black and thick, tar-like, reeking of something old. I checked my mirrors and no reflection. The trailer lights glowed red, but the ground behind me swallowed the color like it didn't exist. Then, just before I went inside the station, I saw it again. Far down the road, under the flicker of a streetlight, standing there, watching. I blinked, and it was gone. The clerk inside didn't even look up when I came in. Just said, "You headed north or south?" "South," I told him. He shook his head. "Don't. Not tonight." I asked him why, and he just muttered something about the stretch near Blanco and lights that ain't from cars. When I looked outside again, my rig was spotless. No tar, no mud, no sign of anything. But when I climbed back in the cab, I saw one thing that didn't belong. A handprint on the inside of the windshield. Black, smudged, like soot, and the glass was cold to the touch. That was 3 years ago. I still run freight, just not that route. Never again. Sometimes late at night when I'm cutting through West Texas and the CB goes dead quiet, I hear a faint sound in the static, a voice, calm, familiar. "Keep driving, Ray." And if I glance at the mirrors too long, I swear, just before the dawn light breaks, I see something walking in the dust behind me, keeping pace. I still hear the engine behind me every time the CB goes quiet. Name's Earl McKinney, been hauling cross-country since '93. 28 years behind the wheel, and I've seen damn near everything the road can throw at you. Blizzards, blown tires, drunks, and dust storms that turn day into night. But I'll tell you this straight. Nothing I've faced out there ever got under my skin like what happened east of Abilene, at a little rest stop folks call Devil's Bend. I didn't even know the name until later. I just needed to stretch my legs, use the restroom, grab some shut-eye before pushing into Dallas. I figured it was just another empty pull-off. Turns out it wasn't empty at all. It was September 14th, a little after 3 a.m., hauling refrigerator units from El Paso to Shreveport. I'd been running steady since sunset, maybe too steady. The road had gone dead quiet after Abilene. No taillights, no truckers on the CB. Just static and the hum of tires on asphalt. The weather was thick. Humid air that clings to you like breathing through wet wool. My windshield was fogging around the edges even with the AC on full blast. I saw the rest stop sign maybe 10 miles out. Devil's Bend, 2 miles ahead. The name didn't register then. I just thought, finally. I hadn't taken a break since Pecos, pulled in slow. The lot was half lit. A few overhead fluorescents buzzing like they were on their last legs. Moths swarmed the lamps, and the shadows they cast looked like something crawling under the glass. I parked near the end by the edge of the tree line. Engine idled soft, steady. Nothing around but wind and the tick of cooling metal. That's when I noticed it. The silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that makes your ears ring, like the world's holding its breath. I grabbed my thermos and stepped out. Air smelled like ozone and rain on dust, though the sky was bone dry. I heard something faint, like whispering, carried by the wind. Figured it was the radio from another trucker parked nearby, but when I looked around, there were no other trucks, no cars, no one. Just my rig, the light hum of the lamps, and those whispers. They weren't coming from far away. They were coming from the direction of the restrooms, the concrete building at the far end of the lot. The sound reminded me of CB static, that low hiss with bits of voice cutting through. Except this was too clear. Like I could almost make out words, but not quite. I called out, "Hello? Anyone there?" Nothing. The whispering stopped just like that. So I started walking toward the building. Every step echoed off the concrete. The closer I got, the colder it felt. My breath started to fog, though the truck thermometer read 73 degrees. Then just as I reached the corridor that led to the restrooms, I heard it. My name. Soft. Right next to my ear. Earl. I froze. Couldn't even breathe for a second. The corridor ahead was empty, lit by one flickering bulb. The sound wasn't behind me, wasn't ahead. It was around me, like it came from the air itself. I took one step back, heart pounding. The whisper came again. This time lower, drawn out, like someone breathing through a radio. Earl. Now, I'm not a man who scares easy. Spent my life in truck stops that could double as war zones. But I swear to you, I'd never felt cold like that before. Not outside, not inside, but inside my chest. I turned and walked back to the rig fast as I could without running. Didn't even hit the restroom. When I climbed back into the cab, the air inside felt wrong. Stale, heavy, like someone had been sitting there breathing too long. I turned the key. The engine roared to life. For a moment, the dash lights flickered. All of them. Then my CB came alive. Just static at first. Then a voice broke through. "You shouldn't have stopped here." It wasn't a human voice. It sounded flattened, like it had passed through wires 1,000 miles long. Then silence. I was done. Shifted into drive and started pulling out. The headlights swept across the far edge of the lot, and that's when I saw movement behind my trailer. Something tall, thin, walking. It didn't have the rhythm of a person. Each step looked delayed, like watching old film footage where every frame's slightly off. I hit the brakes, leaned forward, but whatever it was, it melted back into the shadows like it was never there. The whispers came back through the CB. Not one voice this time. Many. Dozens, maybe, all whispering over each other. "He's one of them!" Turn off the lights. Keep driving. I killed the radio. Rolled out of there. Pedaled down harder than I cared to admit. Didn't even check my mirrors. When I hit the highway again, my GPS glitched. Screen flashed white, then black, then replayed my route back into the rest stop. Like it was trying to send me back. I shut it off. Drove blind the next 20 miles until I saw a diner light. I parked under a halogen sign and sat there shaking. Tried to rationalize it. Bad signal, heat exhaustion, sleep deprivation. That's what I told myself. But when I checked my driver's log, something didn't make sense. According to the timestamp, I'd pulled into the rest stop at 3:02 a.m., pulled out at 3:33 a.m., exactly 31 minutes. Thing is, I wasn't there for more than 5. I swear on my life, still, I figured maybe the log lagged a bit. Could happen. But then I remembered my dash cam. I popped the SD card out right there in the diner, plugged it into my laptop. At first, it showed exactly what I expected. The rest stop lot. The corridor, the edge of the woods. Then, at 3:33 a.m., the feed glitched, like static crawled across the lens. And in that static, for just a second, something moved behind my trailer. Not a shadow. A figure, pale, long, walking slow, head tilted, arms too low. The headlights from my rig barely caught it, but enough to show what looked like a face with no features. Then, frame by frame, it turned toward the camera. And just before the feed cut out completely, one thing appeared clear on the screen. A shape of a mouth opening, like it was whispering, and then the camera froze. Timestamp, 3:33:33. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Next morning, I asked around at a truck stop near Clyde if anyone knew that rest area. Old-timer looked up from his coffee and said, "You mean Devil's Bend? Ain't there anymore. Been shut down since the 90s. State tore it down after a murder-suicide there. Whole family travelers. Locals say if you stop there after midnight, the road remembers you." He laughed when he said it, but his eyes didn't. When I passed that way again 2 months later, there was nothing there. No lot, no lights, no building. Just a stretch of dirt and a stand of twisted mesquite trees. But here's the thing. Every time I drive past that mile marker, my CB lights up. Static, then whispering. Always the same word. Earl. I still see the timestamp 3:33 every night I'm on the road, glowing on my dash even when the engine's off. Name's Bill Garner, 42 years on the road. I've hauled everything you can think of. Livestock, frozen meat, auto parts, even carnival rides once. I've had breakdowns in the Mojave, run whiteout through Wyoming, and seen things on I-40 that'd make you pull over and rethink your life choices. But what happened just outside Amarillo, back in the fall of 2019, that one broke me in a way I still can't explain. It started with a dispatch I never should have taken. It was a Tuesday night, mid-October. I'd just finished a drop in Albuquerque and was waiting for my next assignment. My rig, a 2014 Peterbilt 579 steady, reliable, clean running, was fueled and ready to roll. Dispatch came through the tablet around 11:27 p.m. Nothing strange about that. The message was short. Pickup, Freight 47. Location coordinates attached. Time sensitive. No signature required. That was it. No company name, no manifest, no paperwork. Just a ping on the GPS. A set of coordinates about 15 miles northeast of Amarillo near an old industrial yard. I called dispatch to confirm. The line clicked, static hissed, and then a voice, flat clipped, said confirmed. Proceed immediately. Do not contact the client directly. Didn't sound like my usual dispatcher, Maggie, but sometimes the night crew rotates. I figured maybe corporate contracted out the job. Happens more often than you'd think. I left the truck stop, grabbed a black coffee, and headed east on US 60. The highway was quiet. No cars, no radio chatter. Just the faint hum of power lines against the dark Texas wind. The coordinates led me down a side road that cut through open pasture. No streetlights, just a long, straight dirt track leading toward a row of abandoned warehouses. The sign by the gate was half rusted, letters barely visible. McKinley Freight Yard, closed since 2004. That should have been my first red flag. I pulled through the gate anyway. Gravel popped under the tires. The headlights swept over empty trailers and weeds tall enough to hide coyotes. At the far end of the yard sat one trailer, unmarked, sitting alone back against the fence. The number on the side read 47, faded, rust bleeding through the paint. The air around it was colder. Not the breeze kind, the dead air kind, like you just opened a freezer door in the middle of summer. My windshield fogged. I shut the engine off, stepped out, and the silence hit me. No crickets, no wind. Just stillness thick enough to feel. When I walked toward that trailer, the gravel crunched too loud under my boots. The padlock was already off, just hanging there. That's when I hesitated. Every instinct told me to walk away. But freight's freight, and I'd been driving long enough to know strange jobs usually pay the best. So I climbed up the ramp, grabbed the latch, and pulled the door open. The hinges screamed. Inside, nothing, just emptiness. Steel walls lined with deep gouges like something with claws had tried to tear its way out. The floor was coated in a thin layer of frost. I could see my breath cloud in front of me, even though the air outside was pushing 60 degrees, and then a sound. 3 knocks from inside the trailer walls, slow, rhythmic, hollow. I stepped back fast. My flashlight beam shook across the metal. There was no one inside, just those claw marks running from floor to ceiling. And then I noticed something. The numbers etched into the steel near the front panel. Not painted, not stenciled, scratched in, 47. Do not haul. It follows. I backed away, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed to leave, but when I turned, my truck's headlights flickered, once, twice, and died. The entire yard went black. Then I heard it again. Not knocking this time, scraping. From the ground, from behind the trailer, from somewhere I couldn't see. It circled the rig, the sound of claws dragging over gravel. My CB crackled to life, though I'd turned it off hours ago. The static built, high-pitched, then leveled into a voice. Driver of Freight 47. Manifest incomplete. The tone was mechanical, distorted like an old dispatcher loop. I froze. Who is this? I said. Identify your station. The reply came immediately. This load is not cleared for transport. Look, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I was sent coordinates. I didn't. You were not sent. Then the CB cut off too hard. The trailer door slammed shut behind me. I swear to God I hadn't touched it. The latch clanged, metal locking metal. And then, something moved inside, a thud, then another. Then a low, scraping drag like claws over the floor. The walls began to hum, deep, resonant. The sound went through me like static electricity. I backed up to the cab, grabbed the handle, but it was ice cold, like touching dry ice. When I finally got the door open, the engine turned over without me hitting the key. The dash lights flickered, every gauge dancing. GPS came on by itself, same coordinates, same words. But now the screen pulsed red, repeating, "Return freight 47, return freight 47. I slammed it shut and floored it out of that yard. When I hit the highway, the mirrors were dark. No reflection. Not from my headlights, not even from the trailer. Like it wasn't there, but I could feel it. The truck felt heavier, engine straining though the bed was empty. And then, from the back of the cab, faint but unmistakable, a sound. Breathing, slow, shallow like someone trying not to be heard. I didn't look, couldn't. I just kept my eyes on the white line, knuckles locked around the wheel. The air inside the cab smelled wrong, metallic, burnt, like wires overheating. The radio buzzed with half words. "Leave it." Off the road. "Oh, not yours." By the time I hit Amarillo city limits, everything stopped. Engine smoothed out. CB went silent. But when I glanced at the clock on the dash, the time made no sense. 5:47 a.m. I'd only been gone an hour. There's no way that drive took 6. Next morning, I called dispatch to report. Asked about Freight 47. They had no record of any such job. No call logs, no coordinates sent. Said the system showed my rig idle all night in Albuquerque. I emailed them the message from my tablet. They said no message existed. Log history wiped clean. Then came the kicker. When I checked my truck's dash cam footage, the timestamp jumped from 11:27 p.m. to 5:47 a.m., straight through, 6 hours, gone. And in that final frame, right before it froze, you can see the reflection of my trailer in the rear camera. But it's not empty. There's something inside, pressed against the window, a shape, long fingers spread on the glass, mouth open, and right beneath it, scrawled into the frost, are 2 words, "Freight returned." That was my last night running west of Oklahoma. I sold the Peterbilt 2 months later. Can't drive nights anymore. Not since then. Because every now and then, when I check the GPS on my phone, no matter where I am, it flashes one word for a split second before loading the map, F47. And when it does, I swear I feel that same cold air seep in, like something's still waiting for me to finish the haul. Sometimes I think the road doesn't forget its cargo. It just waits for the right driver to come back. Name's Tommy Reynolds, been driving rigs for nearly 30 years. I've seen storms that should have flattened me. Ice on I-10, semi-trailers jackknife on slick asphalt. But nothing prepared me for what happened outside El Paso. On that stretch of desert highway that feels like it never ends. I'll admit, I've always scoffed at trucker tales about hitchhikers who vanish mid-ride. Every driver has one. The ghost stories that get passed around at late-night diners. A thumb in the dark, a tap on the window, and poof, gone before the next mile marker. I never believed them. Until that night. It was October 23rd, around 11:15 p.m. My rig, a 2017 Kenworth T680, was loaded with electronics, bound for Phoenix. Road was mostly empty, desert stretching in every direction under a muted, starless sky. I had the CB on, exchanging static chatter with a few other night haulers, but after about an hour the frequencies went dead, just whined and the hum of tires on asphalt. The temperature had dropped suddenly, like the desert itself had exhaled cold. My breath fogged the glass when I cracked the vent. Everything smelled of burnt rubber and hot asphalt, but behind it lingered the metallic tang of desert minerals. Something about the night air felt wrong, too heavy, almost sticky. That's when I saw her. A woman standing just off the shoulder, thumb out. Dark hair blowing lightly in the wind, denim jacket over faded jeans. She looked normal enough, scared maybe, but nothing out of place. I slowed, rolled the window down. "Need a ride?" I asked. She nodded, stepped carefully onto the gravel and slid into the passenger seat. "Thanks," she said. Voice soft, almost dry like dust. "I just need to get home." Her hands were small, pale, resting on her lap. I caught the faint scent of ozone mixed with something sweet, like wet desert flowers after a rare rain. We drove in silence at first. Highway lights blurred across the cab, the road stretching like a ribbon into the dark. She never mentioned a town or a street, only repeated she wanted to go home. Then, about 20 miles in, she spoke again. Voice calm, almost matter-of-fact. "Have you seen him? My boy, have you seen him?" I glanced at her, confused. "Who?" I said, "My boy." She repeated, her eyes distant. "He was here. Right here. Did you see him?" I looked over. The passenger seat was empty, not leaning forward. Not ducked down, empty. I blinked. 1 second she was there, the next, gone. I reached over instinctively. The seat was wet, soaked, I froze. The cab smelled different now. Earthy like wet desert clay. And something else. Coppery, metallic, and like blood. I touched the seat. My gloves came back stained red-brown. My breath caught in my chest. I slammed on the brakes, eyes darting around the road. The highway behind me was empty. No car. No sign of her. The CB crackled suddenly. Not static this time, and voices overlapping, faint whispers hard to decipher. "Watch him. He's coming." Tommy. My name. Clear. I yanked the wheel into the shoulder, heart hammering, trying to rationalize. Maybe someone in another truck had played a prank. No, the highway was empty for miles. The desert air pressed against the cab, colder now. Metal panels humming faintly as though alive. I looked back at the seat. The mud blood stain had spread slightly, dark, wet against the vinyl. My hands shook. I couldn't wipe it off. The texture was wrong, sticky, cold, almost moving under my fingers. Then, in the corner of the cab just for a second, I saw her, reflected in the passenger side mirror. Standing in the bed of my trailer. Pale face, dark eyes, hair hanging over shoulders, staring at me. I blinked. She was gone. I tried to start driving again, but the rig's instruments flickered. Tachometer skipped. Headlights dimmed and brightened. Then the rear-view mirrors, the long ones along the trailer, cracked. Hairline fractures spreading across the reflective surfaces like ice over a pond. Through the fractured mirrors, I swear I saw him, a boy, small, thin, crawling across the asphalt behind me. Only for a second. Eyes hollow, mouth open, screaming silent. Then gone before I could even reach the brakes. The CB came alive again. Just one word this time, low and drawn out. Home. The engine hummed, cab vibrating. Something heavy pressing against the truck. Like the weight of the desert itself had shifted onto the rig. I floored it. Tires screamed over gravel. Hard in my throat. The highway stretched ahead like a corridor to nowhere. By the time I reached the next town, Sierra Blanca, the cab had gone back to normal. Mirrors intact, CB dead. Air smelling of diesel and cooling metal, no trace of mud or blood. I checked the seat. Dry, clean. Nothing. Called dispatch the next day. No reports of anyone needing a pickup in that area. No record of a stranded woman. No coordinates sent, no message logged. I checked my log. Time on that stretch. 20 minutes according to the truck's GPS. But it felt like hours. I asked fellow truckers if anyone had seen her. Some nodded. A few told the classic story. A woman hitchhiker who appears on that road, disappears before the end of the ride. Everyone calls her the El Paso ghost. I never wanted to believe it. Until that night. Even now, when I drive that stretch at dusk, I see the faint blur in the mirrors. Just standing, waiting, thumb out, eyes fixed on the road ahead. And sometimes I still smell the metallic tang in the air, and I swear I hear a whisper. "Have you seen him?" I still check the passenger seat every time I drive through El Paso at night. And I always feel the cold breath on my neck. Name's Ricky Malone. Been running freight for over 25 years. I know every stretch of Texas highway from El Paso to Houston. The rhythms of the night, the patterns of other truckers on empty roads. I've dealt with storms, jackknifed rigs, heat stroke in the Panhandle, and icy bridges on I-20. But what I saw near San Angelo, that night still haunts me, and no, I can't explain it. It was September 3rd, about 1:30 a.m., heading north on US 87. My rig, a 2016 Volvo VNL, was loaded with chilled produce, bound for Fort Worth. The night was unusually quiet, dry with a faint smell of dust and ozone, the kind that hints at a storm far off but never comes. Stars were muted behind a veil of thin clouds. The CB chatter was dead except for my own signal. Nothing but static in the early hours. Usually, you'd pick up a few truckers somewhere along the panhandle. Not this time. Silence. The highway was straight, endless, lined by mesquite and scrub. Mile markers came slow, uneven, almost like the road itself was stretching. That's when I saw them. Far ahead, a line of trucks, moving perfectly in sync. Identical rigs, black with chrome trim. No company logos, no plates. Each one spaced the same, rolling down the highway like a single organism. Their headlights didn't flicker. Their exhaust smelled faintly of burnt rubber and ozone, even from a distance. I radioed the lead rig. CB check. Truck in front of you, this is 7 Mike 6, static. Only static, I tried again. Still nothing. My gut tightened. Something was wrong. These weren't just trucks, and they were too perfect, too synchronized, too unreal. I checked my mirrors. Nothing behind me, just my trailer reflecting dim starlight. Then I noticed something else. Mile markers were passing in weird order. 112, 111, 112 again. My GPS flickered like it was buffering. I thought maybe I was hallucinating. Heat exhaustion. A long night on the wheel. I told myself I'd been awake too long, but my hands were cold. Goosebumps under the cab's fluorescent light. Steering wheel vibration fading, like the world itself was going soft around the rig. I decided to pass the convoy. Accelerated, indicator on, eyes ahead. The first truck stayed dead center in its lane, perfectly aligned. I swung wide to the left, and the road bent. I swear it curved sharply like a river, almost physically shifting under my tires. My rig leaned into the curve. Mirrors trembled. Tires screamed over asphalt. When I straightened out, the convoy was gone. Not a single headlight, not a trace of exhaust, nothing on the highway. The hum of synchronized engines vanished like it had never existed. I eased off the gas, scanning the horizon. Total silence. Air smelled metallic, cold, like something had been burning inside the desert soil. The CB was dead again. That stretch of road, locals later told me, was once the site of a mass crash in the 1970s. Over a dozen trucks had collided on a foggy night, everyone killed. Some say the stretch is cursed. Some say the trucks are still driving, following phantom routes, waiting for drivers to pass. I hadn't believed them, not until that night. I pulled over to the shoulder, engine idling low. Mirrors reflected nothing but darkness. My pulse was loud in my ears. Every trucker's instinct screamed at me, "Don't turn around, don't blink, don't breathe too loud." Then my CB sparked. Static first, then a whispering voice, "Why do you follow us?" It wasn't human. Not exactly. Mechanical. Distorted. Layered with echoes of countless voices. Names, maybe. Some that sounded familiar, like radio handles I'd heard in the panhandle decades ago. I dropped the mic, hands shaking. Tried to start the rig. The engine groaned, vibrated strangely, like the road itself was pushing back. Mirrors flickered, showing flashes of headlights in the darkness, even though nothing was there. I floored it, aiming for the next town. The vibration of the steering wheel grew, fading, then pulsing again as if the highway beneath me had a heartbeat. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. By the time I hit San Angelo city limits, everything normalized. Mirrors reflected correctly. CB static gone. The air smelled like diesel and cooling metal. But the image was burned into my memory. Perfect black trucks rolling in sync, no driver, no destination, only waiting for someone to follow. Next day, I asked a local trucker about that highway stretch. Eyes went wide. US 87. "You mean the old graveyard curve?" he said. "Yeah, that's the one. Haven't you heard? Back in '73, fog rolled in, a dozen rigs collided. Highway Patrol closed it, called it cursed. They say trucks drive it still, ghosts of that night." I laughed at first. I wanted to. But the image of that phantom convoy stayed with me. Not like a nightmare. Like memory. Real. Concrete. Something alive. Even now, years later, when I drive long stretches at night, I check mirrors twice at every mile marker near San Angelo. Every now and then, in fog or low visibility, I swear I see a line of headlights, perfectly aligned, rolling down the road, waiting. I don't follow them anymore. I still feel the vibration of synchronized engines in my hands whenever I hit that stretch, even when I'm parked at a truck stop. The road remembers. Name's Earl Whitman. Been driving rigs for 30 years, mostly the southern and West Texas corridors. You learn fast out here. The highways are long, empty, and unforgiving. Heat, storms, icy mornings. You get used to the road, the rhythm of the tires, the hum of the engine. But some nights the road hums back. This one started late October 2018, westbound on I-20, just outside Midland. I was hauling a refrigerated load of fresh produce, and nothing fancy, nothing hazardous, but time-sensitive. I had to get to Odessa before sunrise. My rig, a 2015 Freightliner Cascadia, was tight, clean, running perfectly. The sky was overcast, low clouds moving fast. The wind carried a faint ozone tang, mixed with dry dust from the Permian Basin. The CB crackled occasionally, static, distant truckers saying numbers or mile markers. Mostly empty night. I'd passed the usual landmarks: big oil pump stations, empty diners, the long, flat stretches of West Texas desert. The GPS pinged the next point. The old Midland way station supposedly open. I thought that was odd. The building looked abandoned from the highway. Faded paint, windows dark and cracked, rusted signs swaying in the wind, but the GPS insisted. I slowed, headlights illuminating peeling paint and scattered debris. The asphalt under my wheels hummed faintly. My tires kicked up dust. There was a faint smell, metallic, cold, like old engine oil mixed with ozone, but also wet ash. I killed the engine and leaned back. Silence pressed in from every direction, heavier than the night air itself. Only the distant howl of wind through broken beams. As I stepped down from the rig, headlights scanning the yard, I saw him. A man in uniform, cap, dark jacket, badge gleaming faintly under the flickering overhead lights. He approached slowly, clipboard in hand, boots crunching on gravel. "Evening, driver," he said, voice calm, measured. "You're 20 pounds over," I blinked, trying to process. The station looked abandoned, faded, crumbling, and yet here was this man, solid, real. Okay, I said, reaching for my papers. "I'll get my log." "Just sign here," he said, handing me a small ticket. "You'll want to keep it on file." The wind pushed through the station, rattling the metal canopy overhead. My stomach tightened. There was a faint smell of burnt rubber and metallic cold, like the air itself was scorched. Goosebumps spread over my arms, my hands gripping the ticket. I glanced around. Not a single other rig, not a single soul. Mile marker read 123, then 122, then 123 again. GPS flickered. CB went dead. Static hung in the air. Low hum, almost like a whispered heartbeat. I looked down at the ticket, then back at the man, and he was gone. Just gone. No step back, no shadow, no trace. The wind stirred dust across the cracked asphalt, but he wasn't there. I staggered back toward the truck, still gripping the ticket. The lights above the station flickered. Once, twice, then all went out. Only the cab lights from my rig shone, casting long shadows across empty concrete. The air felt heavy, almost vibrating. I swear I could hear distant footsteps echoing from inside the station walls. Slow, measured, deliberate. Then came a faint voice on the CB, static-laced, whispering my name, Earl. "Earl!" I froze, heart hammering. No one else was on that channel. I tried the radio, talking over the static, but only hiss came back. The temperature dropped. My breath fogged in the cab. The steering wheel pulsed under my hand, subtle at first, then stronger, as though the building itself was pressing on the truck. I tried to reason. Maybe an old heat vent, maybe wind under the canopy, but the cold wasn't air. It was pressure, deep, unsettling, like something unseen was leaning in. I glanced at the ticket again. The ink was running, letters stretching unnaturally. "Do not leave." I tore my eyes away, slammed the cab door, locked it, and floored the engine. Tires screamed over cracked concrete. Rear-view mirrors trembled, reflecting only black, then flickering faintly with the image of the uniformed man standing behind the truck, motionless, arms folded. I didn't stop. Not until the highway stretched empty ahead, safe for the first time in minutes that felt like hours. By the time I reached Odessa, my pulse had slowed, but my hands were shaking. I looked back at the mirrors, normal. The ticket, gone. My rig's GPS recalculated, showing only empty highway, no way station. Weeks later, I called a state officer friend about the station. He went quiet. "Earl, you know that way station burned down in 1993? He said slowly. "Yeah, I know the building's been abandoned. The inspector died in the fire. Nobody survived. They never rebuilt. No one should be there, I laughed nervously, but deep down, I knew what I saw. My own eyes, the ticket in my hand, the cold pressing in on the cab, the uniformed man calm and official yet impossible. Sometimes, when I drive long stretches of I-20 at night, I feel it again. That weight on the steering wheel, the subtle pulse in the air, the whisper of a CB channel that isn't there. And every so often, I swear I see a flicker of a man, cap pulled low, clipboard in hand, standing under a flickering light beside an empty, abandoned way station, waiting. I still check every way station I pass, and I always feel him there even when there's nothing. My name's Earl Mendez, and I've been running freight out of San Antonio for over 20 years. I've driven through just about everything this country can throw at a man. Dust storms, whiteouts, tornado warnings, and long nights that blur together until the highway starts to breathe. But the one thing I can't explain happened on Highway 83 just outside Laredo, Texas. It was early spring. I remember the smell of wet earth and diesel mixing in the air. My run that night was simple. A poultry haul bound for a distribution center north of Corpus Christi. Standard reefer load, nothing fancy. The kind of job I could do half asleep, and most nights, I probably did. I left the plant a little past 11 p.m. The sky was overcast, no moon, no stars, just that low gray haze that sits heavy over the desert when it's about to rain. I was tired but focused. The hum of the reefer unit behind me was steady. The CB was quiet, just faint static and the occasional lonely check-in from another driver somewhere down the line. That stretch between Laredo and Freer is flat and empty. You can drive for an hour and never see another pair of headlights. It's peaceful until it's not. Around 12:40 a.m., I started getting static on my CB. Nothing unusual at first, just faint white noise, like when a signal's bouncing off the atmosphere wrong, but then it started to build. The sound got sharper, more erratic, like something was pushing through it. Then I heard voices. At first, just one, distant crackling through the interference. A man's voice shouting something I couldn't make out. I leaned toward the radio, adjusted the squelch. "Breaker 19, you got traffic on this frequency?" I asked. The reply came instantly. Not a human voice, but a scream. It was sharp and raw, like someone being torn open by the wind. I froze. Then more voices joined in, and dozens of them, all overlapping, all screaming in different pitches, like a choir of agony trying to push through the static. The CB glowed faint green, hissing and trembling in its bracket. Then the voices shifted. The screams became pleas. I could hear fragments, "Come help us, I'm burning, mound can't breathe." The sound faded in and out, distorted by static, but it was there. That's when the smell hit me. Burnt feathers. Not strong, just a faint, metallic char in the air. I slowed the rig, heart hammering. I reached to turn off the radio, but before I could, a single word cut through the noise. Clear, calm, and close. Earl, my name. Spoken like the person was sitting right beside me. I yanked the CB power cord out. Silence. The only sound left was the reefer hum and my own breathing. I pulled onto the shoulder, red dirt crunching under the tires, and then climbed down. The air outside was cool, damp still. Not a soul around. My headlights threw long, pale beams across the empty highway. I walked toward the trailer, boots crunching on gravel. The reefer unit was humming normal. But there was something about the air and a kind of pressure, like the air before a thunderstorm. I remember thinking maybe the sound had come from inside the trailer. Maybe a loose pallet or a broken sensor feeding back into the radio somehow. My brain was desperate for a rational reason. I unlatched the doors. Cold air rolled out, thick, chemical cold that made my skin prickle. Inside, it was dark except for my flashlight beam cutting across rows of poultry cages. Everything looked normal, sealed, stacked, and motionless. Then I noticed something strange. The feathers, the loose ones scattered across the floor. They were moving, not blowing from the reefer fan, not settling from motion. They were shifting, slow, deliberate, as if something invisible was brushing past them, disturbing the air one small ripple at a time. I stood there, light trembling in my hand. Then the noise came back. Not from the CB this time, from inside the trailer. It started low, a muffled crying sound like a human voice trapped in water. Then it rose. multiple voices merging into the same terrible scream I'd heard over the radio. Every feather on that trailer floor burst upward, swirling in a cyclone of white. I slammed the doors shut so hard my knuckles split open. The sound cut off instantly. When I turned around, the road was empty again. The night was silent. I didn't sleep when I got home. I didn't even report it. What would I say? That my load of frozen poultry started screaming in the middle of the highway? I figured maybe it was exhaustion, auditory hallucinations. Happens to drivers who don't get enough rest. But a few days later, I got curious. I called a guy I know, Ricky, who used to run that same route back in the early 2000s. When I told him where it happened, just outside mile marker 214, he went real quiet. Then he said, "You don't know about the fire, do you?" Turns out there'd been a livestock truck fire on that exact stretch of highway back in 1993. Reefer unit shorted, caught the cargo. Driver burned alive trying to open the back doors. Locals said you could hear the chickens screaming for miles. He said nobody runs poultry through there after midnight anymore. Too many stories about radios picking up the burning convoy. I wanted to laugh it off, and I really did. But then Ricky said something that froze my blood. He said, "That driver? His name was Earl, too." I tried not to think about it after that. I switched routes, started hauling construction materials out of Dallas. No more poultry runs, no late-night CB chatter. But sometimes when I'm driving through quiet stretches of desert, when the wind dies and the road hums beneath me, I still get faint static on the radio. Every now and then, I'll hear a fragment of a voice and a cry, a whisper, something human buried deep in the static. And once, about a year later, I was fueling up outside San Angelo when a gust of wind hit the truck. It carried with it a faint smell, burnt feathers. I looked in my mirror and swore I saw something move behind the rig. Just a flicker of white, like feathers swirling in air that wasn't moving. I turned off the pump and got back on the road without saying a word. I don't tell people this story often. Most wouldn't believe me. But every time my CB crackles to life in the middle of an empty night, I turn it off. Because I know, somewhere out there on the dark stretch past Laredo, they're still screaming. And sometimes I think they're calling for me. I still hear them when the CB goes quiet, like they're waiting for me to answer.
Name's Luis Herrera, veteran long-haul driver from San Antonio. I've spent nearly 2 decades riding the highways of Texas, hauling everything from livestock to refrigerated freight. You get used to long stretches of asphalt where the only movement is your own headlights and the distant glow of oil pump stations. Night driving becomes a kind of meditation, calm, predictable, until it isn't. This happened on Highway 87, westbound toward Sterling City, sometime in late November 2021. The kind of night that's quiet enough to make your own rig feel alive. The tires whispering on asphalt, the reefer humming behind me, the air heavy with ozone from the occasional storm miles away. I was running solo in my 2017 Peterbilt 579, hauling a load of automotive parts. Nothing hazardous, nothing unusual. Just me, the road, and a delivery deadline that I couldn't miss. It was past midnight. The sky was muted gray-black, with clouds swallowing the stars. I had just passed a small rest stop near Ballinger, empty except for the rusted sign swinging in the wind. I was pushing steady at 62 miles per hour, trying to make up time, when my CB sparked faintly with static. At first, just the usual noise. A distant check-in from another driver somewhere ahead or behind. But something felt off. The static had an odd rhythm, almost like someone was breathing into the mic. I adjusted the squelch, clicked the channel, but nothing. Just the hum of the night. The air smelled metallic like burnt rubber and cold steel. A faint drizzle had started, leaving slick streaks on the windshield. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, not from fear. I hadn't been scared yet, but from a sense of being watched. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was another rig far ahead, taillights glowing faintly in the distance. But as I approached the curve near mile marker 74, the truck wasn't just ahead. It was barreling straight at me. No headlights, no signals. Just the looming silhouette of an 18-wheeler, tires glowing faintly red as if rubbing against coals. I swerved instinctively, heart hammering, fishtailing into the soft ditch. Gravel and dirt sprayed against the cab. My rig shook, the vibration running through my bones. Adrenaline sharpened every sense. The smell of wet dirt, the hiss of tires, the wind whipping through the partially rolled down window. I slammed the brakes, dug in the clutch, and looked back. The rig was gone. Just gone. No skid marks. No glow. Nothing but the faint mist rolling over the highway. Event. My dashcam captured the event. When I reviewed it later, I could hardly believe my own eyes. A full 18-wheeler appeared on the narrow stretch of Highway 87. Translucent, like smoke shaped into steel. Flames flickered beneath its wheels, not burning the road, not leaving ash, but illuminating the fog in a way that made it feel alive. It moved too fast, and yet it seemed bound to the highway, perfectly aligned with the center line. I could see the driver's silhouette inside the cab, dark, featureless, unmoving. I tried to rationalize. Reflection, optical illusion, hallucination. But the dashcam didn't lie, and I hadn't been tired enough for a hallucination. The CB radio erupted again. Static, high-pitched, almost like metal being scraped across glass. Then a whisper. Luis, just my name. Clear, calm, and close, despite the distance that should have separated me from anyone else. I gripped the wheel, sweat running down my temple, goosebumps rising under the fluorescent cab light. The wind outside carried a faint ozone tang, mixed with the sharp scent of something burning. Not fuel, not rubber, but something older, heavier. I stayed on the shoulder for several minutes, engine running, lights cutting through the fog. The highway was empty again. My mirrors showed nothing. Even the ditch I had hit was undisturbed, save for a few scattered rocks. And yet, I knew it had been real. I restarted the rig, moving cautiously, scanning every curve, every patch of mist. And then, on the dashcam playback, it appeared again, the rig, flickering like a half-formed ghost, just at the edge of the frame. One frame, just long enough for the flames beneath the wheels to lick the asphalt, then gone. Local lore confirmed it later. Truckers called it the ghost rig of Highway 87. Stories stretched back decades. Rigs appearing out of nowhere, trucks barreling head-on with no lights, then vanishing. Some said it was the spirit of a driver who had died in a multi-truck crash near Sterling City in the 1970s, trying to relive that last run forever. I finished my run in silence. Every mile forward was tense, my eyes flicking to mirrors, every shadow in the fog pulling my attention. I didn't stop, didn't check the CB, didn't sleep much that night. Weeks later, I reviewed the dashcam frame by frame, noting the flicker of the rig, the flames beneath its wheels, the unmistakable outline of a driver inside. I tried to rationalize. Software glitch, light reflection, heat mirage. None of it fit. I still drive that stretch occasionally, avoiding the curves near mile 74 after midnight. And every time I get a shiver, not just from the wind, not just from fatigue, but because somewhere out there, that ghost rig is still running, barreling through the fog, searching for the road that ended decades ago. I've told a few trusted drivers, but most laugh it off. They haven't been behind the wheel when a full 18-wheeler disappears into thin air. They haven't smelled burning steel in the dead of night, felt the wheel vibrate with a presence that isn't there, or heard their name whispered from empty fog. I still check the dashcam before every run now. Sometimes, in the early hours when the CB crackles for no reason, I think I hear it. The faint rumble of tires behind me, synchronized, endless, and on fire. I'll never drive that stretch alone after midnight again. Not willingly. And I've learned one thing about Texas highways. The legends aren't always stories. Some of them are warnings. Some are ghosts. I still see the flames in my mirrors sometimes, long after the road is empty. Name's Rafael Rafe Martinez, a long-haul trucker with over 15 years behind the wheel of a Kenworth W900. I know the Texas highways like the back of my hand. The curves, the mile markers, the rest stops, the stretches where the wind sounds like a living thing. I've driven through thunderstorms, ice, and blinding dust storms, but nothing prepared me for what I saw east of Waco on mile marker 143. It was a quiet, late autumn night. I was hauling frozen goods from Dallas to Houston, my rig humming steadily at 60 miles per hour. The road was mostly empty, save for a few distant headlights that appeared and disappeared like fireflies. The CB radio crackled occasionally. Drivers checking in, reporting weather, sharing tired jokes, nothing unusual. I remember pulling over around 2:15 a.m. I'd been driving for nearly 6 hours straight. The mile 143 marker came up faster than I expected. I wanted to reset my CB squelch. For some reason, the channel was dead. No static, no chatter, just absolute silence. It was weird, but the night was quiet anyway. I parked on the shoulder, the truck's amber lights cutting through the foggy haze. The air was sharp and cold, carrying the metallic tang of ozone. The cab was still warm from the heater, but I felt a strange chill crawling up my spine, like the fog was pressing against the glass. I stepped out to adjust the radio, boots crunching against gravel. That's when I saw them, the tire tracks. Hundreds of them, pressed deep into the damp earth, leading straight into the edge of the woods. None coming back out. I squinted, trying to rationalize it. Maybe a logging operation, maybe local farmers testing trucks in the dark. But these weren't recent tracks. Some were decades old, rust staining the soil, wool patterns matching trucks that hadn't existed for years. My fingers lingered over the CB, half expecting a voice to break the silence. But there was nothing, just the quiet hum of the rig and the distant rustle of trees. The air smelled of wet leaves and cold metal. Goosebumps raised along my arms under the fluorescent glow of the cab lights. Something about the night felt wrong. Mile marker 143 is a stretch where radios usually chatter. I've passed it hundreds of times. Every driver I've talked to avoids stopping here after dark. They say the CB dies, strange sounds echo, and people sometimes see rigs disappearing into the trees. I never believed it, until that night. I followed a set of tracks a few feet into the woods. The ground was soft, giving under my boots, the mud sucking at each step. That's when I saw it. A rusted grill, half buried in the base of an old oak. The shape was unmistakable. A Kenworth W900. My exact make, my exact year. I froze, heart hammering. The metal was corroded, warped, the paint long gone. The grill was pressed into the tree as though the truck had been swallowed by the forest. I couldn't explain it. This stretch of road isn't new. I knew every mile of it. How could a truck identical to mine, my truck, be here, decades old and decayed, lodged in a tree? I stepped back, chest tight, the smell of burned rubber and wet metal filling my nostrils. The forest seemed alive with whispers, the sound of leaves moving without wind, faint scraping noises, almost like tires over gravel. My CB burst to life for a moment, static hissing. I thought I'd finally get a signal, but the voice that came through wasn't a driver. It was faint, desperate. Don't follow. I spun around, trying to locate the source. Nothing, just the darkness and the endless rows of trees. I took a step back toward the rig. My dashcam, still recording, caught a faint shimmer along the edge of the woods, almost like a heat mirage, but in the dead of night. I could see the outline of a cab, the familiar shape of my W900, emerging from the fog, following the tracks. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I tried to rationalize. Maybe some local prankster, maybe hallucination from fatigue. But my dashcam didn't lie. It recorded the truck moving along the forest edge, slowing, then vanishing into the fog. There was no turning back, no sound of engines leaving, just gone. I climbed back into my cab, slamming the door. The heater couldn't warm the chill crawling under my skin. I tried the CB again, nothing. Mile marker 143 had swallowed the signal. I drove slowly, every curve of the road feeling unfamiliar, even though I knew it. The fog pressed against the windshield, and for hours, I felt eyes on me from the trees. I made it to my delivery, shaken but alive. The dashboard and tires were intact. No scratches, no mud. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone on the highway. Weeks later, I checked the dashcam footage frame by frame. In a single frame, barely a second long, I saw my truck's grille embedded in a tree and the shimmer of headlights emerging from the fog. The forest seemed to breathe around the vehicle, bending the shadows unnaturally. I shared it with a few veteran drivers. Some nodded knowingly, others laughed it off. But anyone who's driven mile marker 143 after midnight knows the tales. Dead CBs, trucks vanishing, tires leading into nowhere. I never stop there anymore, not after dark. I don't even slow down past mile marker 143 unless I absolutely have to. And every time I hear static on the CB in the dead of night, I feel that same chill, the whisper of metal and mud, the sensation that a truck, my truck, or something wearing its shape, is watching from the trees, waiting for me to follow. Some roads carry legends. Some roads carry ghosts. And some, like mile marker 143, carry both. I still see the faint imprint of tire tracks in my mind every time I drive past. And I've learned not to question it. You don't. You just drive. Every time the CB dies and the fog thickens, I think I see my own truck waiting in the woods, and I don't look back. Name's Marcus Mac Reynolds. Been driving 18-wheelers up and down the Gulf Coast for almost 2 decades. I know the routes, the rest stops, the stretches where your rig hums along the asphalt like a heartbeat. But there's one night I'll never forget. A stormy haul from Corpus Christi that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. It was late September 2019. I just loaded a shipment of seafood, frozen shrimp, and catfish at a dock in Corpus Christi. The sky was low and gray, but I figured it'd hold off long enough for me to clear the city limits. My rig, a 2015 Freightliner Cascadia, was humming beneath me, tires slicing through the wet asphalt. By the time I hit the outskirts, the storm was full on. Rain hammered the windshield. The wipers couldn't keep up. Lightning etched jagged scars across the horizon. The air smelled of salt water and wet asphalt, heavy and metallic. My CB crackled with distant chatter, drivers warning about flooded underpasses, calling mile markers, and trying to drown the static. I was supposed to make it to Victoria by sunrise, a routine drive I'd done dozens of times. But something felt off. Through the deluge, I noticed headlights behind me. At first, I thought it was just a tailing truck trying to keep pace, but they stayed there, too close, almost riding my bumper, for miles. I checked the mirrors. Nothing. No rig, no reflection, just the diffuse glow of headlights cut by sheets of rain. I tried adjusting my mirrors, turning my cab lights on and off, even honking once. The lights moved in sync with me. They didn't flicker, they didn't dip or sway with the road. They followed perfectly, like eyes. The CB fell silent. Static hissed, but no human voice. Just white noise that sounded like a low whisper, like the storm was trying to talk through the radio. My knuckles went white on the steering wheel. I pulled into a roadside turnout near Refugio, hoping the lights would pass. I killed the engine. Silence except for the pounding rain. The lights slid past my truck without a sound, moving like they were hovering, not rolling. I could see them clearly now. 2 orbs, glowing bright white, perfectly spherical, floating about a foot off the ground. I blinked. When I looked again, the fog wrapped around them like smoke, and they vanished. No trace, no reflection on the wet pavement, nothing. My heart was pounding, chest tight. I reached for the CB again, just static. I got out to inspect the shoulder. The rain hit like icy needles, running down my neck, stinging my eyes. There were no tire tracks, no scorch marks, nothing that could explain 2 glowing spheres hovering in midair. I shook my head. Fatigue, stress, storm nerves. Rational explanations, I told myself. But the memory of the lights, unreal yet somehow tangible, was burned into my vision. I got back in the cab, trying to focus on driving. My tires hissed against the wet road. The orbs reappeared, a little farther behind, then closer, keeping pace, relentless. Every instinct in me screamed to look in the mirrors, but I didn't want to. I felt like looking directly would make them real. The CB squelched, just static, then a voice. Faint, distorted, almost drowned by the storm. Mac, don't stop. I froze. The name. Not from dispatch, not from any trucker I knew. My hands shook. I gunned the engine and hit the highway again, wipers slashing furiously through the sheets of rain. The orbs followed until the next curve, then vanished as suddenly as they'd appeared. I kept driving, night stretching endlessly, the storm relentless, my rig humming under me. Every mile, every reflection in the mirrors, I felt them watching. The air inside the cab was thick, metallic, smelling faintly of burnt ozone, even though nothing electrical had tripped. Goosebumps crawled under my shirt, the hair on my arms standing straight. By the time I reached Victoria, the storm had passed, leaving only fog and dripping asphalt. The orbs were gone. My rig was intact. Nothing had touched me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had followed me was still out there, lingering on that stretch of Highway 77, waiting for the next driver to underestimate the night. I checked the dashcam the next morning. Footage of the road was blurred by rain, but in one frame, barely a second long, the two lights were there, floating eerily in perfect formation, gliding along the pavement. Nothing else. No source, no physical connection to the road. I called dispatch, half expecting them to say there'd been another driver, a prank, a fellow hauler testing fog lights. Nothing. Just static over the CB. I've driven that route dozens of times since. I never see the lights again. I never stop at that turnout after dark. But I feel it, a weight pressing against the cab like the orbs are waiting, watching. Some nights, when the rain hits hard and the wipers can barely keep up, I swear I see them in the distance, just beyond the reach of my headlights. I've told a few fellow truckers. Some nodded knowingly, mentioning old tales from Corpus Christi. A storm that moves faster than the clouds, headlights that don't belong to any rig, drivers who vanish without a trace. Others laughed, but anyone who's seen those orbs in the storm doesn't forget. Every time I hear static on the CB, or the road curves just right in the fog, I feel the same chill. And every time, I remind myself, you don't stop, you don't look back, you just drive. The storm passed, the rain slowed, but the memory didn't. Even now, I can feel them behind me on the night road, two glowing eyes drifting through the fog, patient, silent, unrelenting.